short story titled What Remains. The narrative honors the journey of brokenness, redemption, and legacy, shifting perspectives as memory fades and love endures. Antonio Williams, Tony to anyone who ever truly knew him, spent most of his youth trying to outrun the silence inside him. Born in the tight, overheated space of a one-bedroom walk-up in New Haven, Connecticut, Tony came into the world already fighting for breath. His mother, Elena, was 17, fiercely intelligent, fiercely tired, and his father was a ghost story no one told. From the beginning, Tony learned to survive in the quiet, navigating bills and busted plumbing, and the ache of never quite being enough. He carried a weight that wasn't his and promised himself he'd become something more, something else. That fire launched him to college, then into a life that sparkled but never shone. First came the clubs, the lights, the drinks, the endless rotation of parties that blurred day and night. He wore expensive cologne and danced with strangers on rooftop patios that felt like the top of the world. But when the music stopped, the emptiness always waited. When that thrill wore out, Tony turned to things: designer suits, watches that ticked with authority, a sleek high-rise apartment that echoed when he walked. He traveled across continents: Thailand, Brazil, Morocco, searching for meaning in sunrises and sacred temples, hoping one more passport stamp might fill the hole inside him. But it didn't. He came back home and poured his ambition into becoming something practical, something powerful. Tony became a systems engineer, sharp, intuitive, admired. He rose fast. The money came, and with it, validation. But the work, like everything else, began to feel like scaffolding for a life he wasn't really living. The corporate world demanded infinite results in a finite world, and every job was another reminder that value was measured in output, not in soul. Then technology moved faster than he could. AI automation devoured his position. Severance ran out. Applications were ignored. A fraudulent investment turned what was left of his savings into dust. A medical scare drained his energy and his insurance. And finally, just like that, Antonio "Tony" Williams, once a man with global contacts and first-class boarding passes, was standing in a food line with tired eyes and a rumbling stomach, wondering how it had all come to this. He was about to leave when he overheard a volunteer at the donation center mumbling about a broken server. "I could help," Tony said, voice barely more than a whisper. "I used to work in systems design." She looked at him, his weathered jeans, his worn-out coat, and replied gently, "We can't afford to hire anyone." "I'll trade it," Tony said, "for food, something regular." That's how it started, not with a career change or a miracle, but with a quiet offer in the middle of a forgotten line. Tony rewired the whole place. He rebuilt the inventory system, set up an online tracker, streamlined volunteer scheduling. Word spread, donations increased, and slowly, he became a vital part of the foundation. He didn't make much, just enough to afford a small rented room and a few necessities. But for the first time in decades, he felt real. Among the faces that passed through the food line, one stayed with him: Sophia, a widowed mother of 2 small children. She reminded him of his own mother, resilient, stretched thin, silently carrying more than anyone knew. On days when supplies were low, Tony would slip her his share of the food. He didn't think twice about it. It felt like purpose. Her son Javier began following Tony around like a shadow. At first, just curious, then eager. Tony taught him about circuits, systems, logic, but also about patience, responsibility, and how to find meaning in small acts. Then came the accident. Tony didn't remember the fender bender, not until the insurance adjuster called. Tests followed, scans, a diagnosis, early onset Alzheimer's. He didn't tell anyone at first, just kept working, slower, more carefully. But his hands shook. He lost words, left tools in the wrong place. Javier noticed, and then, one night after finding the diagnosis paper crumpled in a drawer, he confronted Tony in the back lot behind the shelter. "Why didn't you tell me?" Javier asked, voice cracking. Tony looked at him for a long time, his eyes full of fog and guilt. I didn't want you to see me fade, he said quietly. From that day on, Javier began shadowing him for a different reason. Learning, watching, picking up tasks Tony could no longer complete. Over time, Tony stepped back, then stepped aside. Eventually, the forgetting became a tide he couldn't hold back. Days passed without recognition. He sat in silence, barely blinking, staring at the same corner of the shelter like it held the answer to a question he could no longer form. Javier never left his side. He would sit beside Tony after shift, sharing updates about the foundation, Sophia's recovery, the kids' school days. Even when Tony no longer responded, Javier kept speaking. Then one day, Javier sat beside him, now a grown man with his own team, managing the foundation Tony helped save. I never told you, Javier said, voice trembling, but I love you. You were the father I never had. He didn't expect a response. But then, like a speaker crackling to life after years of silence, Tony turned his head. His lips moved slowly, painfully. I love you, too. Flooded with emotions, Javier held back his tears. Tony never spoke again. On a golden spring morning, with birdsong sifting through the windows, Tony passed in his sleep. There were no long speeches, no headlines, just a quiet service filled with volunteers, mothers, children, and people who knew what it meant to be saved by a small act of grace. Javier continued Tony's work. He grew the foundation, opened new branches, and eventually ran for public office, advocating for shelter reform and food security. When the time came to name the first permanent shelter he helped build, he didn't hesitate. It was called the Antonio Tony Williams Center for Hope and Renewal. When asked about the name, Javier always said the same thing. He didn't leave behind wealth, he left behind something better, compassion, and that's what remains.